Post-war political awakening, 1919, 1923. The end of World War I found Adolf Hitler back in Munich, a city in upheaval. Germany's Kaiser had abdicated, and the nation was now a fledgling republic struggling with defeat, revolution, and hunger. Like many veterans, Hitler felt adrift. He had no career to return to, no family waiting. In the chaos of post-war 1919, he remained in the army a while longer, not as a frontline soldier, but as a low-ranking guard and messenger in a Munich prisoner of war camp. Discharged? Not yet. The army provided a small paycheck and 2 meals a day, a lifeline in a shattered economy. That spring, Munich was briefly taken over by radical communists who declared a Soviet republic in Bavaria. Hitler witnessed street fighting between rival factions before order was restored. These events only reinforced his hatred of communism and his belief that Germany was under threat from internal enemies. By the summer of 1919, Hitler was still a soldier on the army's rolls, but his duties had changed in an unusual way. The German army, now limited and cautious under the Allied terms, had developed education units to influence troops and monitor political extremism. Hitler's superiors recognized in him a fervent nationalist and effective orator, so they recruited him to an intelligence and propaganda unit. In September 1919, this led Corporal Hitler to attend a meeting of a small group called the German Workers' Party, DAP, one of many fringe political clubs in Munich. The army had ordered him to spy on this group, to see if it posed a socialist or revolutionary threat. Hitler walked into a beer hall meeting out of duty and found his destiny. The German Workers' Party was then an obscure organization founded by Anton Drexler, a local locksmith, to promote German nationalism and workers' rights, strongly opposed to communism. During the meeting, Hitler listened quietly until a speaker proposed ideas he disliked. Emboldened, Hitler stood up and delivered an impromptu tirade against the man's arguments, astonishing everyone with his passionate eloquence. The party leaders were impressed. Here was a man who could captivate an audience. A few days later, Drexler handed Hitler a pamphlet and invited him to join their party. After some thought, Hitler did so. In late 1919, he became DAP member number 555. Though the party, in a bit of showmanship, had started counting memberships at 500 to make itself seem larger, so Hitler was actually roughly the 55th member. It was an unceremonious beginning to a political career, but Adolf Hitler had found a new home. Hitler threw himself into political activism with the same zeal he had once shown on the battlefield. In early 1920, he left the army to work full-time for the tiny party, which met in beer halls and back rooms. He discovered a natural talent for public speaking, a thunderous voice, a gift for polemic, and an intensity that electrified listeners. Soon, he was in charge of the DAP's propaganda efforts. Hitler helped draft a platform of demands, and on the 24th of February 1920, at one of Munich's largest beer halls, he spoke to a crowd of over 2,000 curious citizens. He unveiled the newly renamed National Socialist German Workers' Party National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or NSDAP, which would soon be nicknamed the Nazi Party. Under Hitler's influence, the party adopted a bold symbol, the black swastika in a white circle on a red background, a logo Hitler personally designed to grab attention and project a sense of power. In that crowded hall, Hitler's speech stirred the audience into a frenzy for the first time. The Nazis' mix of extreme nationalism, calls to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, and ferocious blame of Germany's misfortunes on Jews and communists resonated with people looking for answers in a time of national humiliation. As one early party member recalled, "We erupted into a frenzy of nationalistic pride. From that moment on, I belonged to Adolf Hitler, body and soul." By 1921, Adolf Hitler's oratory had made him the rising star of the Nazi Party. The quiet loner of years past was now a fiery agitator who held audiences spellbound with speeches laced with venom and vision. He railed against the Versailles Treaty that had imposed harsh peace terms on Germany, denouncing it as a criminal diktat that must be torn up. He blamed Marxists and November criminals, the democratic politicians who signed the armistice, for Germany's surrender in 1918. And increasingly, he peppered his speeches with scapegoating of Jews, whom he painted as the hidden force behind both communism and Germany's economic troubles. These conspiratorial claims found willing ears and audiences already steeped in post-war frustration. Hitler discovered that by channeling people's anger and offering clear enemies to blame, he could forge an emotional connection with crowds. Dressed in a threadbare suit, his piercing blue-gray eyes alight with fervor, he would lean forward at the podium, jabbing the air with his finger, his voice rising from a hoarse rumble to a shouting crescendo that left listeners trembling. Many laughed at this strange, almost possessed figure at first, but many others, especially disaffected war veterans and members of the lower middle class hit hard by post-war economic crises, began to see in Hitler someone who spoke their pain and promised deliverance. Hitler's rapid ascent within the young Nazi Party did not come without conflict. In the summer of 1921, while he was away in Berlin trying unsuccessfully to raise funds, some members of the party's executive committee in Munich attempted to curb Hitler's growing dominance. They proposed merging with the Socialist Party from another city, a move that would dilute Hitler's influence. On hearing this, Hitler rushed back to Munich and, in a characteristic dramatic gesture, resigned from the party altogether, vowing not to return unless he was granted dictatorial powers. The committee realized that without their star speaker, the party would likely collapse. So, on the 29th of July, 1921, they acceded to Hitler's demand. He was installed as chairman of the Nazi Party with almost unlimited authority by a vote of 533 to 1. Adolf Hitler, aged 32, had effectively become the Führer leader of his own political movement, a role he would never relinquish. Under Hitler's forceful guidance, the Nazi Party grew from a ragtag fringe group into a militant political force in Bavaria. He surrounded himself with loyal lieutenants from among the early recruits. These included former Army Captain Ernst Röhm, who organized a band of ex-soldiers into the Sturmabteilung SAC, or Stormtroopers, a paramilitary wing of the party that protected Nazi meetings and frequently brawled with communists in the streets. Another follower was Hermann Göring, a dashing World War I flying ace, and Rudolf Hess, a fellow veteran. Both would become prominent in years to come. With their help, Hitler cultivated what observers called a cult of personality. He was no longer just a man. To his supporters, he became a symbol of German revival. At rallies, the SA would march in carrying swastika banners, and crowds would salute Hitler with cries of Heil, as if he were already a head of state. Hitler fed on this adulation. The once lonely drifter now found his purpose. He would save Germany, and Germany in turn would embrace him as leader. By late 1923, Germany was in crisis once more, this time due to hyperinflation and political turmoil. The value of the German mark had plummeted, wiping out savings and causing misery for millions. The democratic government in Berlin wobbled under the strain, while extremists on both left and right plotted to overthrow it. In the southern state of Bavaria, where Munich is located, right-wing sentiment ran especially high. Some Bavarian leaders even talked of marching on Berlin to impose a nationalist dictatorship. Inspired by this atmosphere and by the success of fascist leader Benito Mussolini in Italy, who had marched on Rome and seized power the previous year, Hitler decided that the moment was ripe for bold action. On the evening of the 8th of November 1923, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party made their fateful move. They launched what came to be known as the Beer Hall Putsch, an attempt to overthrow the Bavarian government by force. That night, in a packed Munich beer hall called the Bürgerbräukeller, local conservative leaders were holding a rally. Hitler, backed by armed SA men, stormed into the hall, fired a shot into the ceiling, and dramatically proclaimed that a national revolution had begun. Confronting Bavarian officials at gunpoint, Hitler coerced them into a back room and tried to extract their support for his coup. For a moment, it seemed he might succeed in winning them over. Outside, hundreds of Nazi supporters seized strategic points in the city. The next morning, November 9, Hitler, along with World War I General Erich Ludendorff, a revered military hero who had lent his name to the uprising, led about 2,000 armed Nazis in a march toward the center of Munich, aiming to take control. What followed was a brief and bloody confrontation on the cobbled streets. At a narrow lane near the Feldherrnhalle, the marchers encountered a cordon of Bavarian police and soldiers, who had remained loyal to the government. Someone fired a shot, it is unclear who, and chaos erupted. A volley of gunfire cut through the ranks of the marchers, killing 16 Nazi supporters and 4 policemen. Marchers scattered in panic. Hitler himself was thrown to the ground, dislocating his shoulder. He crawled, dazed, to a waiting car and fled the scene as the coup collapsed. Ludendorff, in a show of bravado, kept marching straight into the police line and was arrested on the spot. Within hours, the much-vaunted National Revolution had fizzled. Hitler went into hiding at a friend's house in the countryside, despondent and convinced his life was over. For 2 days he evaded arrest, even by some accounts considering suicide in his despair. But there would be no dramatic last stand. On the 11th of November 1923, Hitler was arrested and charged with high treason for leading the failed putsch. Photographs from that time show him in custody, head bowed slightly but managing a defiant half-smile for the camera, as if aware that defeat had, paradoxically, made him more famous than victory might have. Indeed, while the coup was a fiasco, it propelled Adolf Hitler onto the national stage. Newspapers across Germany carried reports of the audacious young agitator in Munich who had tried to seize power. Many Germans, while disapproving of his methods, now learned his name for the first time. In right-wing circles, Hitler's bold action and Ludendorff's involvement made him a kind of folk hero, a martyr for the nationalist cause who had dared to challenge the hated November regime. As one commentator later noted, though it failed spectacularly, the Beer Hall Putsch established Hitler as a national figure.